I was 64 the first time my own grandson looked straight through me as if I were a stranger. It was a Sunday, late autumn, the kind of day when the light slips away before you've even finished your tea. I remember the smell of chicken roasting in the oven, the ticking of the kitchen clock, and the way the wind kept nudging the old lilac by the window. I had ironed the tablecloth that morning, the one with the little blue flowers, and set out the good plates even though I knew no one cared about such things anymore. Mark had texted that they might swing by in the afternoon. People don't visit anymore, they swing by, like they're a breeze, not a commitment. I fussed over the food anyway, tasting the potatoes twice, adjusting the oven temperature, checking the gravy as if Michelin inspectors were about to come in instead of my own family. When I heard the car pull up, my heart did that ridiculous little leap it still does, the one I keep thinking will stop as I get older. It never does, it just hurts in a different way now. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the window. I saw my son, Mark, getting out of the driver's seat, his shoulders broader now, hair thinner at the crown, that faint stoop he gets when he's stressed. Beside him was his wife, Lena, in her neat beige coat, scarf perfectly draped, expression as controlled as always. And between them was Theo, my grandson, almost 13 now, taller every time I saw him, his hair falling into his eyes. I opened the door before they had a chance to knock. "Hello, darlings," I said, smiling too widely, like I always do. Theo stepped in first, smelled the air and said, "Is that roast chicken?" "Yes," I said, glad he noticed. "With potatoes. And the apple crumble you like." He gave a small shrug. "Cool." He walked past me toward the living room, headphones still hanging around his neck, thumbs already moving over his phone. He didn't hug me. He didn't kiss my cheek. He used to run at me like a little bullet and almost knock me over, shouting "Nana," as if I were something to be celebrated. That stopped a couple of years ago. I had told myself it was just age, that at 12, boys don't hug grandmothers, they hover near screens. Mark stepped in, gave me a quick one-armed hug that smelled faintly of aftershave and office air. "Hi, Mum," he said. "You look good." He always says that. It's what people say when they don't have the time or courage to look closely. Lena came in last. She air-kissed my cheek, her lips not quite touching my skin, and said, "Hello, Irene," in that smooth, careful way. Come in," I said. "I've just made tea. Food's nearly done." I led them to the kitchen. Theo sat at the table, his eyes glued to his phone. Mark leaned on the counter, flexing his fingers like he was trying to shake off an invisible weight. Lena took a seat and crossed her legs, looking around as if assessing the room for a magazine spread that never happened. "You've rearranged," she said. "I moved the dresser," I replied. "My back complained about it for 2 days. But it looks less cluttered now, don't you think?" She said, non-committal. Her eyes slid over the room the way people's eyes slide past a homeless person on the street. They saw, but they didn't really see. We made small talk over tea. Weather, work, school, the holy trinity of neutral topics. I asked Theo how he was doing, trying to sound casual. "Okay," he said. "What are you learning now?" He shrugged. "Stuff. Any subject you like best?" He sighed like I'd asked him to recite the entire periodic table. "I guess, science?" "That's good," I said. "I liked science at school. Not that we had the things you have now. We were thrilled if the Bunsen burner worked." Theo gave a barely there smile and then went back to his phone. Mark watched him with a tight jaw but said nothing. I busied myself with checking the chicken again. It didn't need checking, neither did the potatoes, or the carrots, or the gravy, but I checked them, ladled things, stirred things, pretended I was making adjustments. It's amazing how much fuss you can make when you don't know what else to do. It wasn't until we sat at the table that I felt the first real, sharp pang of something being wrong. We held hands, as we always did. A habit from when my husband, Tom, was alive. He used to insist on it, even when the children rolled their eyes. "We thank the food and the company," he'd say. "You can be sarcastic about God later, but for now, you'll show gratitude." He's been gone 9 years, and still I hear his voice at the table. I reached for Theo's hand, and he let me take it, but his fingers were limp, like a stranger's. Mark squeezed my other hand once, a weak echo of his father. Lena didn't take anyone's hand. She folded her own neatly in her lap and looked down in what I assumed was her version of respect. "Thank you for this food," I murmured out of habit, "and for the time together." It was only half a prayer now. The other half was memory. We started eating. The conversation, such as it was, skated over the surface of things. Mark was busy at work. Lena's company had merged with another. Theo's school had some new policies. Words, 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 none of them connecting properly with anything inside me. Then, somewhere between the chicken and the crumble, it happened. I was telling a story about when Mark was little, about the time he'd poured flour all over the kitchen floor to make snow because he missed winter. I thought it was harmless, nostalgic, something light. And your granddad walked in, I said to Theo. Stopped dead, looked at the floor, looked at Mark, and said, "Well, if it's snow, we'd better make snow angels." And the two of them lay down there, right on the floor, in that mess, waving their arms about. It took me hours to clean it up, but it was worth it just to hear them laugh. I smiled at the memory. It was one of my favorites. Theo didn't smile. He didn't even look up. He just said, "Dad told me you make up stories sometimes." It was casual, offhand, as if remarking on the salt. I froze for a moment, spoon halfway to my mouth. "I make them up?" I repeated. He shrugged, still staring at his plate. He said, "Sometimes you remember things wrong. Or, like, imagine stuff that didn't happen." My eyes flicked to Mark. He went pale under his office tan. "I didn't," he started, then stopped. "Theo, that's not what I..." But his eyes slid away from mine. They landed somewhere on the tablecloth, on the blue flowers I had ironed that morning. Lena cleared her throat softly. "Mark was just explaining," she said, choosing her words like a lawyer, "that as people get older, their memories can blur. It's normal, nothing to be upset about." I looked at her, then back at my grandson. "That story did happen," I said quietly. "Your granddad had flour in his hair for 2 days. And your dad sneezed and left white handprints on the sofa. We had to beat the cushions outside until the neighbors complained. I remember it very clearly." Theo glanced at his father, then back at me. His face caught between two loyalties. "Okay," he muttered, not convinced, "just done." The rest of the meal passed stiffly, the air thick with something I couldn't quite name. After they left, after Lena had given me another air kiss and Theo had mumbled a goodbye without lifting his eyes, I stood alone in the doorway and watched their car pull away. The house felt very quiet when I went back in. The clock ticked too loudly. The leftover chicken sat on the counter, suddenly dull and pointless. Like a joke told to an empty room. I washed the dishes slowly, listening to the running water. My hands moved automatically through motions they'd done thousands of times, but my mind stayed on that one sentence. "Dad told me you make up stories sometimes." I dried my hands, walked to the living room, and sat in the armchair by the window. The lilac outside, now almost bare, scratched softly against the glass when the wind caught it. The mugs from tea time still sat on the coffee table. One of them had a faint lipstick mark from Lena's careful mouth. I picked up my phone. No missed calls. A message from a neighbor about a knitting group meeting next Tuesday. A notification from the bank. Nothing from Mark. I stared at his name in my contacts list for a long time before putting the phone down again. Maybe he had just said something poorly. Maybe Theo misheard. Children do that. They translate adult worries into blunt little statements that cut without meaning to. But something lodged in me that night. A splinter of unease I couldn't pull out. ... It wasn't only that one comment. I can see that now, looking back. Rarely is anything truly about one moment. Usually it's a trail of small things that only makes sense when you look at it from far away. There had been signs. There was the time a few months earlier when Mark had called and said, "Mum, you forgot our lunch last week." "I didn't forget," I said. "You cancelled. You said there was a problem at work." "No, that was the week before." He replied, "Last week you were supposed to come into town. You never showed up." I remembered sitting at my kitchen table that day, waiting for his call to say he was leaving the office. The call never came. I'd assumed he was busy again. I'd been cross, but quietly, the way older women are cross, under the skin. "Mark, I wasn't meant to come in last week," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "We were going to see how the week goes, you said. You told me you'd let me know." Silence crackled on the line. "Maybe I got mixed up," he said finally. "Lena said?" He trailed off. "What did Lena say?" I asked. "Nothing. It's fine. Forget it." But it wasn't nothing, and I couldn't forget it. There was also the time I told a story about Mark's first day at school, only for Lena to say with a little laugh, "You've told that one before." It was nursery, not school. "Mark doesn't even remember that, do you, darling?" It must be something you embellished. That word, embellished, as if my memories were a dress I'd stitched sequins onto for attention. And there was the way they had started explaining things to me slowly, carefully, like people on television talking to someone whose first language isn't English. "Mark's job is very demanding now," Lena would say. "Like, very stressful, Irene. It means he can't always answer his phone straight away. You remember that, right? Or, Theo's got exams coming up. Big exams. So he needs his space. You know how teenagers are. As if I hadn't raised one. Little things. Nothing you could pin down. Nothing you could reasonably accuse someone of. And yet, taken together, they formed a pattern, like constellations you only notice when someone points them out. After that Sunday lunch, the pattern sharpened. The phone calls became shorter. Mark would answer, his voice distracted, and cut the conversation off with, "Right, Mum, I've got to jump on another call." Or "Lena's just come in. We're in the middle of something." When I suggested coming over, there was always a reason it wasn't a good time. Theo had extra homework. They were redecorating. They were trying a new routine. Weeks slid past between visits. I told myself not to make a fuss. Children have their own lives. That is what everyone says. Don't be clingy. Let them live. You don't want to be a burden. Those phrases hang over older women like the swords of Damocles. Say too much and you're needy. Say too little and you disappear. So I kept busy. I joined the knitting group properly instead of just dropping in sometimes. I baked things for the church sale. I took longer walks. I started doing a crossword every day, circling the words with satisfaction. But at night, when the house was dark and the radio off, I would lie in bed and feel the emptiness pressing in around me. The silence felt thicker. Sometimes, when the loneliness was heavy, I would talk aloud to Tom, which is one of those habits that makes people raise their eyebrows if you admit it. "I'm not losing my mind," I would say softly into the dim room. "I remember things. I remember you. I remember us. The flower on the floor. The way Mark cried when he fell off his bike at 7 and you pretended not to see the tears. I remember all of it. So why don't they?" Tom, being dead, never answered, of course. But voicing it made it feel less like it was eating me from inside. The big crack came in spring. I was in my small back garden, kneeling in the dirt with my hands in the soil. There is something comforting about dirt. People think of it as mess. But to me it feels honest. It doesn't pretend to be anything else. It smells of earth and worms and possibility. I was thinning out the carrots, muttering apologies to the ones I pulled up too early, when my neighbor Mary's head popped up above the fence. She's in her 70s. Cheeks like rosy apples, hair perpetually in curlers unless she's going into town. "Irene," she called. "Phone." I stood up, knees complaining, and wiped my hands on my trousers. "What? Your phone?" she repeated. "It's been ringing." I could hear it through the wall. I went inside, wiping my shoes on the mat. The phone was still flashing on the kitchen table. Missed call, unknown number. Voicemail. I pressed play. A recorded voice from the GP surgery. "This is a reminder for Mrs. Irene Collins to attend her memory assessment appointment on Tuesday the 23rd at 10 a.m. at the memory clinic. If you cannot attend, please call to reschedule." I froze. Memory assessment. They must have got the wrong person. I thought, maybe there was another Irene. Maybe it was for someone else. Mistakes happen. Computers get things muddled up. But the message had said my full name. My date of birth. My heart started to beat faster. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls inching closer. I called the number back. "Rosewood Medical Center, how can I help?" A cheerful, harried voice answered. "Hello," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "This is Irene Collins. I just received a message about a Memory assessment appointment. Yes, the woman said. Let me just check. Yes, you're booked in for Tuesday the 23rd at 10 a.m. There must be a mistake, I said. I didn't book any appointment. It was requested by your GP after discussion with your family, she replied. We sent a letter as well. I didn't get any letter, I said. And, discussion with my family? What discussion? There was a pause. I could hear typing in the background, the faint murmur of other phones ringing. I'm not allowed to go into that over the phone, she said eventually, but the referral note says there were concerns about your memory and confusion. The assessment is just to see how we can support you. Concerns, I repeated slowly. My tongue felt thick. Whose concerns? Family, she said. It doesn't specify. If you'd like to discuss it, you can talk to your GP. For now, should I confirm you're attending the appointment? I stared at the salt and pepper shakers on the table. The little ceramic hen and rooster I'd bought at a market 40 years ago. They stared back cheerfully, unchanged. My hands were trembling. Yes, I said after a moment. I'll attend. Perfect, Mrs. Collins. We'll see you then. When the call ended, I stood there, phone still in my hand, the dial tone buzzing like an insect. Concerns about your memory and confusion. Family. I sank slowly into the nearest chair. The wood creaked under my weight, familiar and solid. I pressed my fingers against my temples. I am not crazy, I thought. The thought itself was like a flare in the dark. Loud, bright, desperate. I forget small things sometimes, like everyone my age. Names take longer to surface. I sometimes walk into a room and have to think for a second what I came for. I write grocery lists now, something I never did before. But I am not confused about my life. I know who I am. I know who my children are. I know what happened in my house. And yet, someone had gone to the doctor behind my back. Someone had spoken about me as a problem to be assessed. Family. I didn't have many candidates. I picked up the phone and dialed Mark. It rang only twice before going to voicemail. His recorded voice came on, brisk and impersonal. You've reached Mark Collins. Please leave a message. Mark, I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. It's Mum. I've just had a call from the surgery about a memory assessment that my family apparently discussed with the doctor. I would very much like to know what this is about. Please call me. I hung up and sat there, staring at the phone as if I could will it to ring. It didn't, not that hour, not the next. By evening, when the light outside had gone soft and gray, my anger began to simmer underneath the fear. Anger is easier, more familiar. Fear sits in your body like a stone. Anger moves. I called him again. This time, he picked up. Hi, Mum, he said, sounding breathless. I was just in a meeting, sorry. Everything okay? No, Mark, I said, more sharply than I'd intended. Everything is not okay. You sent me for a memory test without telling me? It's not a test, he said quickly. It's just an assessment, to see if you need any support. And you didn't think it was relevant to tell me? I asked. I had to hear about it from a recorded message. He sighed. Mum, please don't get upset. Then tell me the truth, I said. There was a pause. I could hear office noises faintly in the background. A printer whirring, a door closing, someone laughing. Lena spoke to the GP, he said finally. She's been worried. We both have. Worried about what? I demanded. Your memory, he said. You've been mixing things up, Mum. Forgetting plans. Getting confused about dates. Telling stories that don't quite line up with reality. I closed my eyes. Give me one example, I said. There have been lots, he replied. You forgot Theo's birthday last year. My eyes snapped open. I did not, I said. I called him in the morning. I spoke to him. We joked about how he was finally taller than me. You called him the day after. Mark said. He told me. He was hurt. That's not true, I said, the room tilting slightly. I remember sitting here, at this table, with the sun coming through the curtains, and I called him. He was still in his pajamas. He said they were going to the trampoline park later. He said he was wearing the t-shirt with the dinosaur on it. He described it. Mark was silent for a long moment. Maybe he just told you what they did the day before, he said eventually. Maybe you're misremembering when you called. I am not misremembering, I insisted. I wrote it on the calendar. I crossed it off that evening. The calendar is still on my wall, Mark. with a circle around that day. "Mum," he said, in that tone people use when they're talking to someone who's being unreasonable. "This is exactly what we're worried about. You sound so certain, even when what you're saying doesn't match with reality." Reality, as if mine was optional. "What else?" I asked, my voice going cold. "You thought we cancelled lunch on you when you were supposed to come into town." He said, "You told Mary that we'd stood you up." "I did not tell Mary any such thing," I snapped. "I said there was a confusion with dates." "She said you seemed very upset," he added. "She mentioned it to Lena when they saw each other at the shops." Mary and Lena at the shops. Two women discussing me like I was a misbehaving child. Is there anything I'm allowed to feel upset about without it being passed along and pathologized? I asked quietly. "That's not fair," he said. "We're just trying to make sure you're okay." Lena's parents started having problems in their 60s. Her dad got diagnosed really late, and it was awful. She's just hyper-aware of the signs. "And what signs have I shown?" I asked, beyond daring to remember my own life. "You misplace things," he said. "Theo told us you kept asking him where your keys were when you'd already found them." "I asked twice," I said. "And that was because he muttered something about them when he came in." "This is ridiculous. You're acting like I've been wandering the streets in my nightgown." "No one said that," he replied. "Mum, the assessment isn't a punishment. It's just to get a baseline. To make sure we catch anything early, if there is anything. Loads of people do it. And did it not occur to you," I asked, my voice trembling now, "to talk to me first? To treat me like a person rather than a problem to be handled?" "We didn't want to worry you," he said, "or make you defensive." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Well, that worked splendidly. Mum, I'll go to the appointment," I said, "but not because I agree with how you've gone about this. I'll go because I want proof that I am not what you've been telling people I am." "What do you mean, telling people?" Mark asked. "Nothing," I said. "We'll talk after the assessment." I hung up before he could say anything else. For a long time, I sat at the table, feeling the echo of my own heartbeat in my throat. Then I stood up, went to the hallway, and looked at the calendar pinned there. Theo's last birthday was circled in red. Next to it, in my handwriting, it said call in morning 9 a.m., trampoline. I traced the letters with my finger. The ink did not smudge. The memory did not fade. The memory clinic was in a new building near the hospital, all glass and pale wood and so-called natural light. The waiting room had potted plants and a bowl of bright plastic fruits for decoration, which I thought was a strange choice. Mock fruit in a place where they examined your mind. I sat on one of the gray chairs, clutching my handbag like it contained my old self. Around me were other older people, some with walking sticks, some with family members. A woman in a floral dress was talking loudly about how the parking machines never bloody work. A man with a cap was staring at the floor, his wife holding his hand and whispering into his ear. When the nurse called my name, I stood up a little too quickly, my knee twinging. I followed her into a small room with a desk and a couple of chairs. The walls were decorated with soft paintings of landscapes, probably chosen to be calming. They made me feel like I was visiting a dentist who discovered watercolors. The assessor was a young woman with a ponytail and an earnest face. She introduced herself as Dr. Shaw, smiled in that professional way, and asked me how I was feeling. "I'm fine," I said, perhaps more curious than anything. "Curious is good," she replied, folding her hands on the desk. "We're just going to do some questions and tasks to see how your memory is functioning. It's not an exam you pass or fail. It's a snapshot." I nodded, though the word snapshot made me think of photographs, and it was a simple shape, two intersecting pentagons. I copied it, my hand steady enough, though the lines weren't perfect. I made a joke about never having been an artist, and she laughed politely. She asked me to recall the 3 words. I repeated them. Then she asked me questions about my daily life. Did I manage my own finances? Yes. Did I cook? Yes. Did I ever leave the stove on? No. Did I get lost in familiar places? No. She listened, nodded, clicked her pen a few times. At the end, she smiled again, more sincerely this time. "From what I can see today," she said, "your cognition is within the normal range for your age. There are no major concerns." Of course, we can't predict the future, but right now, you're functioning very well. Relief washed over me so strongly I had to grip the edges of the chair. So I'm not losing my mind, I said. She shook her head. No, some forgetfulness is normal as we age. But your results don't indicate dementia or significant cognitive impairment. Can I have that in writing? I asked. She blinked. We'll send a letter to your GP. I'd like a copy, I said. For myself. Of course, she said. We can arrange that. As I walked out, letter promised, the sunlight outside felt different. The world looked the same, but something had shifted inside me. I had come seeking proof. I had got it, on paper, with a doctor's signature. And yet, under the relief, anger coiled itself more tightly, no longer unformed but sharpening. It's one thing to fear you might be imagining things. It's another to learn that other people are the ones rearranging the story. I didn't see Mark and Lena immediately after the appointment. Part of me wanted to call them right there from the parking lot and read the results out loud. Another part of me wanted to wait, to gather myself, to decide what mattered most. I took the bus home instead, sitting by the window and watching houses and trees slide past. A little girl across the aisle was humming to herself, her hair in two plaits. Her mother scrolled through her phone, half listening. There was a time when mothers would have told their daughters to look out of the window, to count red cars or spot birds. Now the world is full of glowing screens and bent necks. Sometimes I wonder if we're all letting our memories be stored elsewhere so we don't have to carry them. When I got home, I made myself a sandwich I barely tasted and sat in my armchair, the appointment circling in my mind like a hawk. Normal range for your age. No major concerns. If I hadn't insisted on that appointment, what story would have continued to spread? Because that's what it had become, a story. Mum's getting confused. Mum's not remembering things properly. Mum is making up stories. And stories have power. They shape how people look at you, how they interpret everything you do. A misplaced key becomes a symptom. A repeated question becomes a warning sign. I thought of Theo, telling me Dad said you make up stories sometimes. I thought of the unseen conversations that must have happened. The whispers at family gatherings I hadn't been invited to. The phone calls I wasn't on. I thought of Lena, smooth and composed, explaining my supposed frailties to doctors and neighbors. Concerned, of course, always concerned. The longer I sat there, the more one thought rose above the rest. This wasn't just about worry. It was about control. Lena had always liked things tidy. She liked schedules that ran on time, rooms that looked like magazine pages, conversations that followed her script. She didn't like mess, whether it was flour on the floor or emotions spilling out sideways. I, unfortunately, am not tidy by nature. My drawers are full of old letters and orphaned socks. My stories wander. My memories are crowded and rich. I say what I think a little more than some people find comfortable. I am, in short, untidy in ways that can be inconvenient if you're trying to manage everything. What better way to tidy away an inconvenient older woman than to suggest that she is not reliable? That her words can be safely ignored because her mind is not what it used to be. Once that idea takes hold, it justifies all sorts of quiet cruelty. The cancelled visits, the decisions made without you, the patronizing tone. It becomes easy to say, we didn't tell Mum because she'd only get confused, or there's no point asking her, she won't remember, or she's imagining things. You become not a person to be consulted but a variable to be managed. By late afternoon, I had made up my mind. I would not shout. Shouting never changed anyone's heart, it just made them dig in. I would not beg. I would not cry. I had done enough of that in empty rooms. I would ask for the truth. And I would decide what to do with it. Mark came over that Saturday, alone. He texted in the morning, "Can I pop by later? Need to talk." I could practically hear the tension in the words. He arrived with his shoulders hunched, his car parked slightly crookedly outside. No Lena, no Theo. Just my son, standing in my doorway like he had when he was a teenager coming home late. "Hi, Mum," he said. "Come in," I replied. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured tea without asking, muscle memory. He wrapped his hands around the mug even though it was still too hot. "How did it go?" he asked. The assessment? I asked. You haven't spoken to them? They sent a note to my email saying they'd seen you, he said. Nothing else yet. I handed him the letter I'd received that morning. He read it in silence, his eyes moving quickly over the lines. Cognition within normal range for age. He read aloud. No current evidence of dementia or significant cognitive impairment. He swallowed. That's good. It is, I said. Isn't it? He put the letter down carefully, smoothing the edge. I'm relieved, he said. I really am. I sipped my tea. Are you? He looked up, frowning slightly. Of course. Relieved enough to reconsider some of the things you've been telling people about me? I asked. His frown deepened. Mum, no one's been telling things. I held his gaze. Theo told me that you said I make up stories sometimes. Mary mentioned you and Lena were worried I was getting confused. A doctor's office called to tell me about an appointment I didn't know existed, requested by family. Somewhere in there, stories were told. About me, without me. He opened his mouth, shut it again, then said, we've been concerned. That's all. Concern isn't slander. No, I said evenly. But letting a narrative grow that I am unreliable, that my memory cannot be trusted. That is more than concern. Especially when you didn't come to me first. He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture so like his father's when he was frustrated that it made something ache in my chest. You'd have taken it badly, he said. You're taking it badly now. I'm taking it seriously, I said. There's a difference. You made me a topic of discussion rather than a participant. That is what I can't accept. He stared at his tea. Steam curled up between us, vanishing into the air. Lena thought, he started, then stopped. This is the second time you've hidden behind Lena's thoughts, I said. What do you think, Mark? He flinched slightly at the sharpness in my voice. I think, he said slowly, I think I've watched my wife deal with her father's deterioration. I've seen what it looks like when you ignore the signs. And I think when she started pointing out things about you, I listened. Maybe too quickly. Maybe too much. What kind of things? I asked. Specifics, Mark, not vague impressions. He pressed his lips together, thinking. She said you repeat yourself a lot, he said. Telling the same stories over and over. Getting details wrong. Like the flower thing. The flower thing happened exactly as I told it, I said. If my repeating it bothers her, she can tell me. But since when is an older woman telling old stories a sign of mental collapse? By that standard, half the world is demented. He gave a small, involuntary smile, then sighed. She also said you'd called her twice in one evening to ask the same question about Theo's Christmas present, he added. You didn't remember calling the first time. I remembered that evening. I had called around 6 to ask what kind of headphones Theo wanted. Lena had been distracted, said she'd text me a link. At 9, when no link had come and the shops were closing, I'd called again. She'd sounded annoyed. I remembered perfectly well that I had called, I said. But I also remembered that she hadn't sent the link. So I followed up. That's called being persistent, not confused. He rubbed his forehead. Mum, you're spinning everything. Am I? I asked. Or have you been seeing everything through the lens of a story someone else started? He looked up sharply. What story? The story that I am losing my mind, I said. That I am fragile and unreliable and need to be managed. He held my gaze for a long moment. I saw his jaw tense, the muscle in his cheek twitch. Then his shoulders sagged. Lena's been, he began carefully, concerned about you for a while. She says you're unpredictable sometimes. That you don't cope well with change. That you fixate on certain things. Such as? I asked. Like when we rearranged Christmas plans last year, he said. You got very upset. You changed them the day before, I said calmly. From coming here, as we'd planned, to going to her parents, without even asking me. Just informing me after it was decided. I had already bought food for 4 people. I had a turkey the size of a small child in my fridge. Forgive me for requiring a moment to adjust. He winced. She felt you were guilt-tripping us. I was hurt, I said. I said I was hurt. If you're so unused to me expressing pain that you interpret it as manipulation, that's a different issue. We sat for a moment in taut silence. It's not just that, he said finally, quieter. She thinks you don't respect boundaries. Whose boundaries? I asked. Hers, he said. She says you interfere, that you criticize her parenting, that you tell Theo things that undermine her authority. Specifics, I repeated. She mentioned the time you told Theo he didn't have to finish everything on his plate if he was full, he said. After she'd told him to finish. I remembered that evening. Theo sitting there, pale and uncomfortable, his plate piled too high. Lena insisting food shouldn't be wasted. Me seeing my grandson's eyes go glassy with the effort of swallowing. I told him to listen to his body, I said, because I still remember what it feels like to be forced to eat when every part of you says no. I remember my own mother slapping my hand when I couldn't manage another bite of liver. If that's undermining, then I suppose I'm guilty. Mark looked very tired. Mum, I'm not saying she's right about everything, he said. But from her perspective, you question her in front of Theo. You question me. It makes her feel like you don't trust her. And when she started pointing out these things, I didn't want to dismiss her worries, especially with her history. And so instead of sitting down with me, your mother, and saying, Mum, can we talk about some things that are bothering us, you chose to let this idea grow that I'm unstable, I said. Do you see how that feels from here? He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I handled it badly. That's not all of it, I said. He swallowed. What do you mean? I said, that this narrative has spread. Beyond you and Lena, beyond the GP. I'd like to know who, exactly, has been told that I've lost my marbles. Single quote. He flinched at the phrase, good. No one used those words, he said. What words did they use, then? I asked. Because the effect is the same. Who's been told I'm confused? Unreliable? Imagining things? He hesitated. Her parents know we were worried, he said. Mary might have got the impression, and Theo. Yes, I said. Theo, my own grandson, looking at me like he can't tell if what I'm saying is real. Do you understand what that does? His face crumpled. For a moment, I glimpsed the boy he'd been, scraped knees and wide eyes, hiding behind me when dogs barked too loudly. I didn't think, he began, then stopped. I didn't think it would go that far. Stories rarely stay where you put them, I said softly. They leak, they grow, they attach themselves to innocent things. We sat in silence for a long while. The clock ticked, a car passed outside. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and then fell quiet. What do you want me to do? He asked at last. There it was, my moment of choice. I could have shouted. I could have thrown the letter at him, told him he didn't deserve a mother who fought this hard to be seen. I could have demanded that Lena apologize to me, in person, on her knees. Some part of me wanted that, briefly, in a flash of childishness. But under that, quieter, was something else. A tiredness, a clarity. I am 64. I do not have infinite time left. I do not want to spend the years I have fighting for someone else's version of me. I want you to stop speaking about me as if I'm not in the room, I said. I want you to correct people when they suggest I'm losing it, instead of nodding along. I want you to tell Theo that you were wrong to say I make things up. That the doctor says my memory is normal. Okay, he said, nodding quickly. I can do that, and I want you to understand, I added, that trust works both ways. You say you were worried about me, but you didn't trust me enough to bring that worry to me. That hurt, deeply. He looked at me, eyes glossy. I'm sorry, he said again. I was scared of turning into Lena's parents, I suppose. Of missing something, and I thought you'd overreact. I smiled without much humor. You're not wrong about my capacity for overreaction. But I also have a capacity for listening. You might have discovered that, if you'd tried. We both let that sit between us. Then I took a breath. There's one more thing, I said. This isn't just about you. It's about Lena. She has been central in shaping this picture of me. And she has been careful to make it always sound like concern. That is clever. It makes it hard to challenge without looking ungrateful. He hesitated. She's had a tough time with her dad, he repeated, almost by reflex. I know, I said. I am not blind to that. But having scars does not entitle you to wound others preemptively. Her fear does not give her the right to quietly remove my credibility from under me. He stared at the table. What do you want me to do? He asked again, softer. I want you to talk to her, I said. Truly talk. Not just nod and comfort her fears. Tell her what the doctor said. Tell her how her words have affected me. And I want you to watch, carefully, whether she is relieved or disappointed." He looked up, startled. "Disappointed? A person who is genuinely worried about your health will be glad if they are wrong," I said. "A person who needs the story of your frailty for other reasons will feel something else. You will see it if you look." He swallowed, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay. And one more thing," I added. "Until I see some change, I am going to protect myself. That means I will be more careful about what I share. I will not sit quietly while people talk over me. And I may not be as available as I once was. That is not punishment. It is a boundary." The word felt new in my mouth. Boundaries. Apparently, I was allowed to have them too. He frowned. "You mean, you won't see Theo?" "I didn't say that," I replied. "I love that boy, but I will not put myself repeatedly in situations where I am treated like a half-sentient decoration. If you want a relationship where I am present, then I must be allowed to be fully present. Not gently sidelined." We sat a while longer. He left eventually, hug awkward, guilt trailing him like a shadow. After he went, I made myself another cup of tea and took it into the garden. The carrots were growing stronger now. The lilac had tiny green buds. Life, stubborn as ever, pushing through. I sat on my rusting metal chair, cup warm between my palms, and let the air move around me. I had done what I could from my side. The rest would unfold as it did. Change came slowly, at first invisibly, like hair growing. There were no dramatic confrontations. No slammed doors. No tearful speeches. Life rarely gives you scenes as neat as television. What I noticed first was that Mark called more often, and for longer. He asked more questions about how I spent my days, and he actually listened to the answers. There was a new hesitancy in him, a carefulness, as if he'd realized he'd been walking carelessly around something fragile and was trying to step more gently. Lena was harder to read. The first time I saw her after that conversation with Mark, her smile was tighter than usual. She hugged me, briefly, without the air kissing this time. Then sat at my table and complimented the biscuits I'd made. "I heard the assessment went well," she said. "It did," I replied. "I'm glad," she said, the words sounding slightly strained, like a note just off key. I watched her. The doctor's words echoed in my head, cognition within normal range. "Are you?" I asked, mildly. She blinked. "Of course. Because it means," I said quietly, "that I am not the problem you feared I was. It means that when I object to something, or remember something differently, it is not because I am broken. It is because I am a person who disagrees, or who remembers her own life." She flushed, color rising under her makeup. "I never said you were broken," she said quickly. "I was just concerned." "There is a difference," I said, "between concern and control. Concern asks, how can I support you? Control says, sit down, we've already decided what's best for you. You've been doing rather a lot of the latter." Her eyes met mine, and for once, she looked unsure. "I watched my father dissolve," she said suddenly, the words spilling out. "We all pretended it wasn't happening. He got lost driving to the shops he'd known for 30 years. He burned toast and set off the fire alarm 3 times in a week. He accused my mother of stealing his watch. And we kept saying, he's just tired, or, he's getting older. It was hell, for years. If we'd gone to the doctor earlier." Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "So when I saw," she continued, grasping for composure, "when I thought I saw those things in you, I panicked. I didn't want to live that again. I didn't want Mark to live that. Or Theo." "I understand that," I said gently. "I do." She stared at her hands. "But I also liked," she said, very quietly, "the way people listened when I said I was worried about you. It made me useful, important." After years of being the daughter who didn't notice her own father fading, I watched her for a long moment. In that instant, underneath the beige perfection and the control, I saw a frightened girl who had once missed what was happening right in front of her and had sworn never to be blindsided again. I saw guilt, hard as a stone, wrapped in layers of competence. It did not excuse what she had done, but it made it human. "Fear can make us cruel," I said softly. especially when we don't admit we're afraid. She looked up, eyes shiny. I'm sorry, she said, the words surprisingly blunt. I didn't mean to make you feel erased. You did, though, I said. For a while, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Standing in rooms where decisions about me had already been made. Hearing words about my mind spoken over my head. She flinched. I know. And now? I asked. Now that a doctor has told you I am not your father. She took a breath. Now I have to stop looking for him in you, she said. And start seeing you as yourself. Which might be harder than I thought. I smiled, a little. I can be quite difficult to see clearly. I conceded. I talk too much. I tell long stories. I bake too many cakes when I'm anxious. I cry at adverts. I remember things in colors and smells as much as in dates. I am not neat, but I am not fading. Not yet. We looked at each other. Something tentative and fragile stretched between us, like a thread that might hold or might snap. I'll talk to Theo, she said. And my parents. I'll correct things. Good, I said, not for my pride. For his sake. He deserves to know his grandmother is not unreliable. That when I tell him about his father's childhood, those stories are real. They are part of him. She nodded. And in the future, I added, if you have concerns, talk to me. Not around me, even if it's uncomfortable, especially then. Her lips twitched. You might not like what I say. I am old, I said dryly. Not made of sugar. I don't need everything to taste sweet. I need it to be real. She actually laughed then, a short, surprised sound. Okay, she said. Real, then. Theo came to see me the following weekend. Alone. Mark dropped him off on his way to what he called a DIY emergency at his in-laws and promised to pick him up later. Theo shuffled in, lanky and awkward, clutching his backpack like a shield. Hi, Nana, he said. Hello, love, I replied. You look like you've grown another inch. I'm going to need a stepladder to hug you soon. He smiled, briefly. Dad says I might end up taller than him. Imagine that, I said. You'll be useful when I need things from top shelves. We sat at the table. I had made biscuits shaped like stars, because why not? He picked one up, inspected it, then took a bite. Good, he said, crumbs dusting his hoodie. They're meant to be, I said. I've had decades of practice. He took another bite, then said, without looking up, Dad said I have to apologize. Oh, I asked lightly. Whatever for? The crumbs on my table? He snorted. No, for saying you make up stories. I see, I said. And what do you think? Do you think I make them up? He hesitated, shifting in his chair. I don't know, he admitted. Sometimes, Mum says, you remember stuff differently. And Dad gets stressed. And they talk after we visit. In the car. About you. Do they? I murmured. He nodded. I shouldn't listen, he added quickly. But I do. Sometimes. I'm not surprised, I said. Car rides are boring. He bit his lip. They said you told them different versions of things. And that you forgot my birthday. I didn't forget your birthday, I said gently. I called on the day. I wrote it down. I remember your voice, telling me about the trampoline. The doctor at the memory clinic says my recall is good. But even if I had, once, missed a day, that would be forgetfulness, not madness. His eyes widened. You went to a memory clinic? Yes, I said, because your parents thought I might be losing my mind. The clinic says I'm not. At least, not in that way. He fiddled with the biscuit, breaking a star point off. Mum's dad, he began, then stopped. I know, I said. He got sick. It was hard. He forgot my name, Theo said quietly. At the end, he would call me, little boy. I hated it. Mum cried in the bathroom a lot. So when she said you might be like him, his voice trailed off. You believed her, I finished softly. He nodded miserably. Listen to me, I said, leaning forward. Your mother is not a bad person. She is scared. Fear can make us say things as if they are facts, when they are really worries. And your father, well, he does his best. Sometimes his best is clumsy. Theo gave a tiny smile at that. I tell stories, I continued. A lot. I've been telling them since before your father was born. Sometimes I repeat myself. Sometimes I add details I forgot the last time. That doesn't mean they're made up. It means they're alive, like people, changing a little each time you see them. He looked at me, really looked, as if noticing the lines on my face for the first time. "I like your stories," he said. "Even if Dad sighs." "So do I replied. "And I'd like you to know that when I tell you about your father, about your granddad, about the flower on the floor, those stories are true. They are part of where you come from. No doctor has found holes in my mind yet. And if they ever do, we'll deal with it. Together, not behind my back." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Nana," he said. "For acting like I didn't believe you. I forgive you," I said. "On one condition." He blinked. "What?" "That next time," I said, "if you hear things about me that confuse you, you come and ask me. Directly, not in a sulky comment over chicken. Deal?" He laughed, a proper laugh this time. "Deal," he said. We spent the rest of the afternoon playing a board game he'd brought and arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It was ordinary. It was perfect. As he left, he hugged me. Properly, arms wrapped around me, head on my shoulder. "You smell like biscuits," he said. "Good," I replied. "Better than mothballs." He rolled his eyes and grinned, then ran out to his dad's car. I watched them drive away. The house felt quiet again, but this time, the silence felt less like abandonment and more like space. You might expect some grand reconciliation after that, some sweeping change where everything was suddenly as it should be. Life doesn't work like that. Lena didn't transform into a warm, hugs and home-baked cookies kind of daughter-in-law. She remained organized, a bit sharp, and occasionally judgmental. But she stopped talking about me as if I were a problem to be solved. At least, not where it reached my ears. Mark still slipped into patronizing tones sometimes, explaining things slowly. I would raise an eyebrow at him, and he'd catch himself, laughing. Sorry, I'm doing it again." Habit formed in fear doesn't disappear overnight. Theo grew taller. His visits became less frequent as school and friends took up more of his life. But when he did come, he listened to my stories with a new attentiveness. Occasionally asking questions, occasionally correcting me on details of his own life with that teenage certainty. I let him. It seemed only fair. As for me, I did what old women in stories rarely do. I drew a line. I stopped saying yes to every invitation that felt more like obligation. I stopped overcooking in the hope that extra roast potatoes would keep people at the table longer. I started saying, "No, that doesn't work for me," when plans were rearranged at the last minute as if my time were an afterthought. I also started talking more openly with my friends. At knitting group, when someone complained that her daughter kept double-checking if she'd taken her pills, I told them about the memory clinic, about the whispers. Heads nodded. Stories poured out. It turned out I was not the only one being quietly moved from person to potential problem in my own family. We laughed, Riley, at the indignity of being treated like toddlers and the terror our children held of becoming orphans to memory. We also shared practical advice. What to ask doctors, how to insist on being present when people discussed us. Letters we could write, in advance, to set out what we wanted if our minds did start to fray. Choosing to face that possibility calmly, on my own terms, gave me a strange sense of peace. Dementia might come one day. The brain is a fragile thing. But if it did, my family would not be allowed to quietly erase me before it happened. I would not go softly into an invented confusion. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the sky deepen from blue to indigo, I thought about the question that had sat underneath all of this. What does it mean to lose your mind? Is it when you forget names? When you misplace keys? When you tell the same story twice? Or is it when you start believing other people's versions of you more than your own? When you hand them the right to define you, unquestioned? By that definition, I had almost lost my mind. Not because of any disease, but because I had nearly accepted a role someone else had written for me, the dotty old woman whose memories were suspect. I chose, instead, to keep my mind. To trust it, with all its flaws and quirks. To defend it when needed, gently and firmly. I still talk to Tom sometimes, lying in bed in the dark. You'd have hated this, I tell him. The sneaking around, the whispering. In my memory, he snorts. Say what you mean, or don't say anything at all, he used to grumble. Life's too short for the rest of it. He was right, as he often was. Here is what I've learned, in these years when people expect me to fade politely into the background. Losing your hearing is hard. Losing your mobility is hard. But losing your credibility, piece by quiet piece, is another kind of cruelty entirely. People forget to ask your opinion. They talk across you. They tell your story in a tone that suggests it's no longer trustworthy. If you are not careful, you start talking less, to avoid the patronizing smiles. You start doubting your own memories. You shrink. The antidote is stubborn, ordinary courage. The courage to say, "I remember," even when others prefer that you forget. The courage to ask, "Who told you that?" when someone looks at you with pity instead of respect. The courage to demand a seat at the table when decisions are being made about your life. I am not invincible. I will, one day, die. My mind might fray, or it might stay mostly intact until the end. I have no say in that. What I can control, for now, is this. I will not let someone else's fear write me out of my own story. So I sit by my window, watching the light move across my kitchen table, listening to the clock tick and the kettle hum. I remember flour on the floor, and a little boy making snow angels. I remember the weight of my husband's hand on my back as we lay there laughing, grainy dust in our hair. I remember, and I know that it happened. No letter, no whispered concern, no anxious daughter-in-law can take that from me. In the end, that is my quiet, stubborn victory, not that my mind is proven perfect, but that I chose to trust it enough to fight for it. And if one day I do start to forget, I hope the people around me will have learned, by then, that the first step to loving someone in their frailty is not to decide for them who they are, but to sit beside them in the garden, in the kitchen, in the quiet of an ordinary afternoon, and ask, "What do you remember? Tell me, I'm listening."